Hi everyone, Sky123 here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Image of the Fendahl. A while back I got some requests to review this story from Mondasian Monster and Guy Ackroyd. I would like to thank you both for those requests. And I'm sorry I couldn't get this review out sooner, but I had to go out and actually buy the DVD as I didn't have this one yet, nor had I seen the story before. So I then had to go and watch the story, of course, and have a couple of watches to get into the nitty-gritty detail. And so then I could review it now for you. And, well, let's first take a look at the packaging before I start with my thoughts on the story. You have nice cover right there with the Fourth Doctor and the Fendahl itself in the background there, and also a skull and a pentagram and a daddy Fendaline, I guess we'll call it, the giant one, and then you also have the baby or the embryo Fendaline that wander around at times. Switching it on its side here, you have of course standard side stuff. On the back you have pictures of the cast and whatnot right there. So Tom Baker, written by Chris Boucher, and this is the last of his 3 stories. He started off with The Face of Evil, which is a very good story in my opinion. Then The Robots of Death, which is an even better story. That one's a really good one. And after that, he wrote this, and that was it really, because he had to move on to script editing for like 7 and whatnot, I believe, and never returned to Doctor Who, sadly. But anyway, blurb and special features there. Opening up now, you can see the 1 disc right there, and taking the booklet out, you can have a look at that. You can see you have standard stuff on the front really there. Opening up to the inside now, you have Tom Baker contributing to the commentary, which is unusual. He doesn't do many, so it's a rare treat when he does one of these. And then finally, if we flip it on the back, you can see it is a 4-part story. Now for some thoughts on this story, and it is clear from the start that there is quite a bit of inspiration taken from Quatermass and the Pit, the classic sci-fi horror story that it is, and there is a lot of inspiration taken in the form of the skull and the whole plot about mankind's evolution being affected. And it's a bit like the demons in that sense. You seem to have quite a few villains in Doctor Who that have affected mankind's evolution. And the demons were also inspired by Quatermass and the Pit, and that whole idea of evolution at the same time, and also the whole symbolism of the devil. This one doesn't take inspiration from that fact though, although it does draw from the occult in the form of the pentagram and all that stuff as well. And it's very much takes inspiration from that story, but at the same time doesn't try to straight up rip it off. It does have its own things going on here. It does sort of tie into Time Lord mythology a bit, with the idea of the Fendahl being a myth from the Doctor's youth and all that, but at the same time it does very much pay homage to that timeless classic Quatermass and the Pit quite a few times in this story. Yeah, anyway, this story does kick off with the aforementioned skull, which is millions of years old, and it's basically, it shouldn't exist, it should be an impossibility, and its discovery revolutionises the idea, mankind's idea of evolution and all that stuff, and that's quite an interesting premise right from the start really. And the Doctor and Leela, of course, get involved when they arrive, find that there's been some strange goings on at Fetch Priory. You have a dead body turning up in the middle of the woods. You have a cover-up going on there with Fendelman, and he's quite an interesting character as Fendelman. He starts off as seemingly a villain here, but eventually we see that he's not, and the main villain is revealed, of course. But yeah, it is interesting how the story sort of alludes to the fact that Fendelman might be the main villain, but then towards the end it's revealed that it's actually Style, and you get that whole line where Fendelman's just like, "We have been used, mankind has been used," and it's very well delivered actually. It's quite an iconic line, probably the one that's most iconic towards this story, and that's sort of like the moment where you well, not where you realise he isn't the villain, because you realise that a bit earlier, but even Style really isn't the villain in a lot of ways. He's just a puppet of the Fendahl, and the Fendahl's quite an interesting concept, the whole Gestalt entity, and the fact that it feeds off life itself, sort of like the energy of life, and it's quite a scary thing when it shows up in part 4. This gold creature right here with the painted on eyes. The painting on eyes make it actually seem even more scary, really. And then just the way it's like rises up and then smiles is very creepy. It's got that sort of like uncanny valley factor going on with it that is quite disconcerting, to be honest, and works very well, although it does do a bit of an odd dance routine. I'm not sure really what's going on there with the arms. And then also the transformation from Thea Ransom into that creature was quite interesting. And Thea as a character started off seeming quite interesting, seemed like she was going places, but ended up just being a plot device to become the Fendahl itself. That was a bit disappointing, but at the same time, that's not saying this story mistreats female characters, because you've also got Leela doing some good stuff in here, and you also have Mrs. Tyler. No, not that Mrs. Tyler from Rose or anything like that. No, this is a different Mrs. Tyler, and she's sort of like the old woman of the village who has some interesting things, sort of like occult connections going on there, but is nevertheless a good character and quite an entertaining one as well, and has a nice double act going on with her grandson, I believe, but I can't remember the character's name. And Leela and the Doctor sort of like instantly hit it off with this woman. They get along very well together. Leela sort of like looks up to her as this wise old sage that she's sort of like used to from her savage growing up, and all her upbringing and everything. That connects quite well. And also the Doctor just admires her for the most part. And she's quite a wonderful character, and despite her age, she still has some very great lines. So she's like, "We need to get on with this before I'm too old. There's going to come a day where I'm too old for stuff like this." And it's some great stuff, and she does work very well with her grandson, whose name I've forgotten, but he's quite a good character at the same time. And then you also have Adam Colby, who starts off with a bit of a double act with Thea, and they sort of like work together and everything, and he's sort of like set up as this typical hero character, really, and ultimately you think if this story wasn't a Doctor Who story, if sort of like the basic story itself had been taken and used as a standalone serial, then he would have probably ended up being the main character. And that's why I was a bit disappointed in part 4, where he sort of like takes a back seat, really, and that's quite sad. They sort of like start him off as this character who talks big game, but then ultimately, so like during the 4th part, the story does let him down quite a bit, and maybe that's just because the 4th Doctor and Leela show up, so it doesn't really have any need for sort of like that hero character in those situations anymore. But at the same time, I feel that it's a bit of a shame that his character wasn't given enough to do during the end there. But yeah, speaking of the Doctor and Leela, they do sort of like go on this little diversion, really, during part 3, I believe, where they sort of head off to the Fendahl planet for no reason. I don't know, it didn't seem to make much sense to me during my watches of the story. I don't see what the purpose of it was. It didn't really serve the story that much. It could have worked just fine without it, really. And that whole thing about we're not going to be in time to save them, Doctor, and everything. It's a time machine. Of course you're going to get back in time. You can get back there a week before if you really want to. But yeah, bits like that did bother me quite a bit. The story does have its flaws. It's not sort of like that Philip Hinchcliffe classic, because it is very much the end of the Gothic horror era, really, with Robert Holmes leaving at this point and everything. You know, you have new script editors taking in. Graham Williams has already taken over as producer. So you had horror of Fang Rock before this. Then you went on to Invisible Enemy, which is sort of like a setup of what you can expect from Graham Williams' era. But then this is sort of like one of those stories that's hanging over from a time from before, and you know, doesn't necessarily live up to those, but at the same time isn't a bad story either. But yeah, it has some interesting things going on. I think this creation right here, the Fendahl, Fendaline, works quite well. It's quite interesting, and you know, different elements of the story. Obviously, some great characters in there as well. Some of them not served as well as they could have been by the story. Some dark moments at the same time, like the Doctor assisting a man in suicide. You know, he gives Style the gun, and then as he's walking away, you hear the gunshot as he shoots himself. And you know, it's quite adult stuff, really. That, and the Doctor's reaction to it is quite solemn and everything. In the way he says he's sorry and everything, it's not sort of like a David Tennant, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It's actually it's underplayed, and that's what works about it. I think when you overplay these things, they do tend to not work as well as when it's just sort of like a simple I'm sorry and everything. It does work quite well, that moment. And then of course Fendelman gets shot in the head by Style, but you just see a little bit of pathetic blood there. I don't know, you think getting shot in the head from that range, you know, you'd have a little bit more, just a bit trickling down your head, but that's just the way they had to go with it, really, because obviously they couldn't show that much on Doctor Who, really, because it's a family program and all that, and you know, I'm happy they didn't, because they didn't need to. It wouldn't have added anything to the story, really. It would have just been unnecessary. So the way they work, I guess they could have worked around it a bit, but at the moment it's just, you know, maybe they should have shot him elsewhere, I don't know, but that bit just didn't work too well for me. But yeah, now we go to Leela, and of course she is now written by her creator. Well, yeah, technically he was a creator, Chris Boucher. Wrote her first 2 stories and everything, and then wrote her for her here as well. And you can sort of tell that she's back in his hands, but you can also tell that she's developed a bit since he was last writing for her. And some things didn't seem quite Leela-y. Yeah, I guess that's the way to put it. Sort of like during the start of the story, it didn't really work. Not that fond of this. Well, I say not that fond. I don't like it at all, really. This costume, I don't know. Didn't see much point. I think the original costume worked perfectly. It sort of like showed off that savage thing. This one is just bland, really, and you know, I hear Louise Jameson wanted it so she could get in and out of it easily and everything, but you know, at the same time I feel that they should have just stuck with the original one throughout, because that one is so beautiful and works very well, and also it's not as revealing, funnily enough. This one is even more revealing than the original, and you know, I think the other one works much more for that savage type character. This one, however, just doesn't look interesting at all, really. And then the hair as well is just a bit off. It just doesn't feel like Leela having her hair up like that. You know, it looks odd. I understand that there wasn't really much of a way around it, because she had got her hair cut a bit too much by accident, and you know, they had to do something because it was a bit too short. But yeah, I feel, I don't know, just the costume and the hairdo just doesn't really go too well with Leela. But at the same time, she does have some great moments in this as well. So like when she's in the hut with what's it called? The 2 characters whose names I can't remember. But one of them was sent by the council to trim the bushes and everything, and then Leela just says, your council should choose their warriors more carefully. Yeah, it's just wonderful lines that are so Leela. That was actually a different scene to the one I'm on about, but it's the same character nevertheless. And you also have Mrs. Tyler's grandson, whose name I still can't remember, at that point as well. Yeah, I'm sort of talking about 2 scenes at the same time here, really, and I'm sorry if I'm getting you a bit confused there. But yeah, I think overall, let's move on to the overall now, because I'm babbling on a bit here. Overall, Image of the Fendahl, I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's nice to go back to this like Hinchcliffe horror style of story, despite with us now moving on from that era. It's nice to see that some bits hung over from that, and we got to see a little bit more, even if it's just one or two stories, before we move into sort of like the later Fourth Doctor stuff, which, yeah, admittedly isn't as good. I mean, it sometimes works quite well when they do it correctly. I mean, the Sunmakers that follows this is very different, but is great. And then you have classics such as City of Death, of course. But at the same time, it's nice to have a bit of Hinchcliffe horror going on here. And overall, it is an 8 out of 10 for me, because it's not as good as a lot of those stories were, but at the same time, it does have its moments, and it is quite good in some senses. Has some things which don't quite work for me, but at the same time, there is a lot to enjoy here, and just the atmosphere, sheer atmosphere that's created, is one of the best parts of this story, and that's sort of like what we love the Hinchcliffe era for, the atmosphere that they had going on and everything. So then, all that's left to say now is thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope it was worth the wait for those of you who requested it. Mondasian Monster and Guy Ackroyd, I'm very sorry this took so long. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time with the review of Torchwood Uncanny Valley, actually. So until then, bye everyone.
Someone's coming.
Your discovery could be one of the most important milestones in human development.
I need help.
I think it's the Fendahl.
Is it alive?
Yes.
I don't...
I said don't touch her! There are 4,000 million people here on your planet. And if I'm right, within a year, there'll be just one left alive.
The place must be left for the one that kills.
It grows and exists by death.
This is not how it should be! You are being used! Mankind has been used!